After many years abroad, Mr. Afo Okeke returned home as a wealthy and successful businessman. During his years overseas, he had worked tirelessly, built a fortune, and achieved the dreams he once thought were impossible. Yet despite all his success, one thing had always remained in his heart: the memory of the woman he loved. They had lost contact years ago, and no matter how hard he searched, he could never find her. He often wondered what had happened to her and whether fate would ever bring them together again. Late one evening, his plane landed at the busy airport in Abuja.
Beautiful.
Carrying a suitcase in one hand and a duffel bag in the other, he slowly walked through the arrival hall. Although he was finally back home, his thoughts seemed distant, occupied by memories from the past. After leaving the airport, he entered a taxi and instructed the driver to take him to a luxury hotel where he had made a reservation weeks before departing from abroad. As the taxi moved through the city streets, Mr. Afo stared quietly out the window. The familiar sights brought back old memories, and he found himself thinking about the life he had left behind. When they arrived at the hotel, he stepped inside and approached the reception desk with confidence.
Absolutely beautiful.
He introduced himself and informed the receptionist that he had a reservation under his name. However, after checking the computer system several times, the receptionist appeared confused. She could not locate his booking. Surprised, Mr. Afo immediately showed her the confirmation details on his phone. The hotel staff investigated the issue further, making several calls and checking different records. Eventually, they discovered that a technical problem had occurred on the hotel's website on the day he made his reservation, causing some bookings to fail to enter the system. Unfortunately, his reservation was one of those affected.
You look absolutely
When
beautiful.
Mr. Afo asked whether another room was available, the receptionist regretfully informed him that the hotel was completely full. Disappointed but composed, he picked up his luggage and left the building. Outside, he hailed another taxi and asked the driver to take him to the nearest available hotel. After a short drive through the city, they arrived at another respectable hotel. It was clean, comfortable, and fortunately had rooms available. Mr. Afo completed the check-in process, collected his key card, and made his way to his room. Exhausted from his long journey, he quickly settled in and fell asleep.
You look absolutely
The following morning,
beautiful.
he woke up feeling refreshed and decided to take a quick shower before beginning his plans for the day. As he stood in the bathroom, enjoying the warm water after days of travel, a sudden knock echoed from the room door. Moments later, he heard the voice of a woman calling from outside, unaware that this ordinary interruption was about to change his life forever and reveal a truth he never expected to discover. The following morning, while Mr. Afo was taking a shower in his hotel room, he heard a knock at the door. A gentle female voice called from outside, introducing herself as the room cleaner and asking if she could come in. The moment he heard her voice, something stirred deep within him.
Beautiful.
It sounded strangely familiar, as though it belonged to someone he had once known very well. However, he could not immediately place it. Dismissing the feeling, he responded from inside the bathroom, telling her that the door was unlocked. The woman thanked him politely and entered the room. Mr. Afo heard the door open and close before returning his attention to his shower. A few minutes later, he stepped out of the bathroom, drying his hair with a towel. As he casually glanced across the room, he noticed a cleaner quietly arranging the bed and straightening the sheets. She was facing away from him, focused on her work.
You look absolutely
At
beautiful.
first, he paid little attention, but something about her presence caught his eye. He stopped moving and stared. A strange feeling settled over him, growing stronger with every passing second. There was something familiar about the way she stood, the way she moved, and even the way she carried herself. Curiosity compelled him to take a few slow steps closer. With each step, his heart beat faster. The closer he came, the more certain he felt that he knew this woman. Then, as she slightly turned her head, he finally saw her face clearly. Time seemed to stop around him. It was Nkechi.
You look
For
absolutely
a moment,
beautiful.
he could hardly breathe.
And you look so
Standing before
handsome.
him was the woman he had spent years searching for, the woman who had believed in him when he had nothing, the woman who had helped him pursue a better life abroad, and the woman he had once planned to marry. He had imagined countless reunions over the years, but never one like this. Never in his wildest dreams had he expected to find her cleaning hotel rooms. Overwhelmed by emotion, he softly spoke her name. Nkechi. The sound of his voice caused her to stop what she was doing. Slowly, she turned around. The moment their eyes met, shock flooded her face. The cleaning cloth slipped from her hand and fell to the floor. She stared at him as if she had seen a ghost. Afo, she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Neither of them moved. Years of separation, unanswered questions, and buried emotions filled the silence between them. Mr. Afo repeated her name, still struggling to believe what he was seeing. Nkechi. Before he could say another word, her face turned pale. The shock was too much for her to bear. Her knees weakened, and she began to collapse.
And you
Instantly,
look so handsome.
Mr. Afo rushed forward. Nkechi, he shouted. Just before she hit the ground, he caught her in his arms. Her body was limp and unresponsive. Fear gripped his heart as he gently shook her. Please, open your eyes. Nkechi, please. But she did not respond. Panic spread through him. He called for help, and within moments several hotel employees rushed into the room. Realizing that she had fainted, they immediately suggested seeking medical attention. Without hesitation, Mr. Afo lifted her into his arms.
Beautiful.
His concern
And you
for her
look so
outweighed everything else. Where is the nearest hospital? He demanded urgently. After receiving directions, he hurried out of the hotel carrying her himself. Throughout the journey, his mind raced with confusion and worry. After years of searching, after endless unanswered questions and failed attempts to locate her, he had finally found the woman he loved. Yet the reunion he had dreamed about was unfolding in the most painful way imaginable. At the hospital, doctors quickly took Nkechi for examination while Mr. Afo remained outside in the waiting area. He was too anxious to sit down.
Absolutely beautiful.
Instead, he paced back and
you
forth,
look so
replaying the
handsome.
shocking encounter in his mind. The image of her wearing a cleaner's uniform refused to leave him. He remembered the bright, hopeful young woman he had once known, and he struggled to understand how her life had changed so drastically. As he waited for news, countless questions filled his thoughts. What had happened to her during all those years? Why had she disappeared without a trace? What hardships had forced her into such a difficult life? Most importantly, would she be alright? For the first time since returning home, none of his wealth, success, or achievements seemed important.
And you
All
look
that
so
mattered was
handsome.
the woman lying inside that hospital room, the woman he had never stopped loving. Standing outside the hospital ward, Mr. Afo felt a storm of emotions raging within him. Confusion, sadness, and disbelief weighed heavily on his heart. The woman he had spent years searching for was finally back in his life, yet the circumstances of their reunion left him deeply troubled. He could not understand how Nkechi, the strong and ambitious woman he once knew, had ended up working as a hotel cleaner and collapsing from exhaustion. Unable to remain seated in the waiting area, he stepped outside and began wandering slowly around the hospital
And
compound.
you look so handsome.
The cool breeze brushed against his face as he walked, but it did little to calm his troubled mind. Memories from years ago gradually resurfaced, carrying him back to a time when life was much simpler, though far more difficult. After graduating from school, both he and Nkechi had struggled to find stable employment. The job market was harsh, and opportunities were scarce. Despite their challenges, they remained inseparable. Their love for each other was genuine and unwavering. During those difficult days, Mr. Afo lived in a tiny one-room apartment and survived on a modest income.
Absolutely beautiful.
Every weekend,
And
Nkechi
you
would
look
visit
so
him.
handsome.
She never came empty-handed. Sometimes she brought food, sometimes small gifts, and sometimes nothing more than her warm smile and encouraging words. Yet every visit filled his small apartment with happiness. Together they spent countless evenings discussing their dreams. They imagined building a future side by side, owning a home, starting a family, and escaping the financial struggles that surrounded them. Eventually, both of them found jobs. While Mr. Afo secured a position with a modest salary, Nkechi was fortunate enough to obtain a better paying job.
You look absolutely beautiful.
Instead of creating distance between
And you
them,
look so
a success
handsome.
strengthened their relationship. They worked hard, saved money, and continued planning their future together. One day, while at work, Mr. Afo noticed a colleague filling out forms for a scholarship program that offered opportunities to study abroad. Curious, he asked questions about it. His colleague explained that successful applicants could earn admission to an international master's degree program. At first, Mr. Afo dismissed the idea as something beyond his reach. However, when he later learned that the same colleague had been accepted, he began to believe that such opportunities were real. The possibility of studying abroad fascinated him. For years, he had dreamed of experiencing life beyond his country and creating better opportunities for himself and those he loved. Encouraged by this new hope, he submitted an application. He did so quietly, without even telling Nkechi, because he never expected anything to come of it. Months later, everything changed. One morning, while checking his emails, he noticed a message from the scholarship committee. His hands trembled as he
You
opened
look
it.
absolutely beautiful.
To his astonishment, he
And
had
you
been
look so
accepted.
handsome.
He reread the message repeatedly, struggling to believe what he was seeing. The opportunity he had dreamed about for so long was finally within reach. But his excitement was quickly overshadowed by reality. Although the scholarship covered tuition fees, it did not provide enough money for travel expenses, accommodation, and other essential costs. His salary was barely enough to support himself, let alone fund an international move. The dream that had seemed so close suddenly appeared impossible again. That evening, he called Nkechi and asked her to
You
visit
look
him.
absolutely beautiful.
He told her he had important
And you
news
look
to
so
share.
handsome.
When she arrived, her excitement was obvious. She immediately sensed that something significant had happened and eagerly pressed him for details. Taking a deep breath, Mr. Afo explained everything from the beginning. He told her about his colleague, the scholarship opportunity, his secret application, and finally the acceptance letter. As he revealed the good news, Nkechi's face lit up with joy. She threw her arms around him and embraced him tightly. "I am so proud of you," she told him with genuine happiness. For a few moments,
You
they
look
celebrated
absolutely
together.
beautiful.
But then she noticed
you
the
look
worry
so
lingering in his
handsome.
eyes. His smile faded, and silence filled the room. Concerned, Nkechi asked what was wrong. Slowly, he explained the financial obstacle standing in his way. He told her that despite receiving the scholarship, he could not afford the additional expenses required to travel abroad. Time was running out, and he had no idea where he would find the money. As she listened, her joyful expression gradually became thoughtful. The room grew quiet. Mr. Afo felt defeated, convinced that his dream was slipping away. Then Nkechi
You
reached
look
for his
absolutely
hand.
beautiful.
"We'll face this together,"
And you look
she
so
said firmly.
handsome.
Her words immediately captured his attention. She then revealed something he never expected. Over the years, she had managed to save a significant amount of money. Without hesitation, she offered to use her savings to help him pursue his dream. Mr. Afo stared at her in disbelief. "Are you certain?" he asked. Nkechi squeezed his hand and smiled. "When it comes to you, I have no doubts," she replied. "I love you, Afo. I believe in you completely. I know you will make something of this opportunity."
You look absolutely
Her faith
beautiful.
in him moved him deeply.
And you look so
Looking
handsome.
into her eyes, he felt a renewed sense of determination. "I love you too," he told her. "And I promise I won't let you down." That night, he made a vow. He promised that once he completed his studies, he would work hard, build a successful career abroad, and create the future they had always dreamed about. He assured her that every sacrifice she was making would be worthwhile. Nkechi believed every word. From that moment onward, they planned everything together. She handed over her savings, an amount that exceeded what Mr. Afo himself had managed to gather after years of work. Her sacrifice became the foundation upon which his future would be built. Before his departure, Mr. Afo purchased an engagement ring and proposed to her. The ring represented more than a promise of marriage, it symbolized hope, trust, and the future they intended to share. When the day of departure finally arrived, they stood together at the airport. It was one of the most emotional moments of their lives. They held each other tightly, reluctant to let go. Tears filled their eyes as they exchanged promises and words of encouragement.
You look
Neither wanted to say
beautiful.
goodbye, but they both believed the separation would only be temporary. Eventually, the final boarding call came. With one last embrace, Mr. Afo walked toward the departure gate, carrying not only his luggage but also the hopes, sacrifices, and unwavering faith of the woman he loved. Back in the present, as he stood outside the hospital ward, those memories felt painfully vivid. Every sacrifice Nkechi had made for him flashed before his eyes. The woman lying unconscious inside that hospital room was the very person who had made his success possible. And as he thought about everything she had done for him, one question haunted him more than any other. What had happened to her after he left? After spending several minutes reliving painful memories from the past, Mr. Afo slowly returned to the hospital waiting area. His mind was overwhelmed with emotions, and his heart felt heavier than ever. The reunion he had dreamed about for years had finally happened, but instead of joy, he found himself surrounded by confusion, worry, and unanswered questions. Sitting down on one of the waiting room chairs, he stared blankly at the floor, lost in thought.
You look absolutely
A short
beautiful.
while later, a doctor emerged from one of the hospital corridors. The doctor looked around as though searching for someone. The moment Mr. Afo noticed him, he immediately rose from his seat and hurried over. "Doctor, how is she?" he asked anxiously. The doctor's expression was serious, and that alone made Mr. Afo's heart sink. The doctor explained that after Nkechi had been brought in, the medical team conducted several examinations to ensure that she was stable following the shock and fainting episode. However, during the test, they discovered something far more concerning. Mr. Afo listened attentively as the
You
doctor
look
continued.
absolutely beautiful.
"There is another issue,"
And you
the
look so
doctor said
handsome.
carefully. "She has been living with a serious illness for quite some time." The words struck Mr. Afo like a blow. His body stiffened, and he struggled to process what he had just heard. The doctor continued, explaining that Nkechi's condition had progressed significantly and that she would require surgery as soon as possible. The recommendation was urgent. Delaying treatment could make her condition much worse. For several seconds, Mr. Afo could not speak. His chest tightened, and countless thoughts rushed through his mind. After finally gathering himself, he
absolutely
asked the
beautiful.
only question that mattered at that
And you
moment.
look so handsome.
"Is she awake?" The doctor nodded. "Yes. She regained consciousness a little while ago, but she's very weak and needs rest." Without hesitation, Mr. Afo asked to see her. The doctor agreed and led him through a series of hospital corridors toward the ward where Nkechi had been admitted. As he approached the room, his heart pounded heavily. He wasn't sure what he would say or how she would react. Years had passed since they had last seen each other. So much had changed, yet the feelings he carried for her remained as strong as ever.
You look absolutely
When he entered the
beautiful.
room, silence greeted
And you
him.
look so handsome.
Nkechi lay quietly on the hospital bed with her eyes closed. The sight of her instantly filled him with sadness. He paused beside the doorway and studied her carefully. The vibrant, energetic woman he remembered was almost unrecognizable. She had become painfully thin. Her face appeared pale and exhausted, marked by years of hardship and suffering. She looked as though life had placed an unbearable burden upon her shoulders. Mr. Afo slowly pulled a chair closer and sat beside her bed. For several minutes, he simply watched her breathe. Questions
You
filled
look
his mind.
absolutely beautiful.
What had happened after
And
he
you
left?
look so handsome.
Why had her life taken such a difficult turn? What circumstances had forced her into a job far beneath her abilities? Why had she never contacted him? The more he looked at her, the more his heart ached. Suddenly, Nkechi stirred slightly beneath the blanket. Mr. Afo immediately leaned forward. Slowly, her eyes opened. At first, she seemed confused, looking around the unfamiliar hospital room as she tried to understand where she was. Then her gaze settled on him. The moment she recognized his face, shock spread
You
across
look
her features.
absolutely beautiful.
Even after seeing him
And you
earlier
look
at the
so
hotel,
handsome.
she still seemed unable to believe that he was truly there. Mr. Afo quickly leaned closer and spoke in a calm, reassuring voice. "It's all right," he said softly. "It's me. Afo. I'm here now. Everything is going to be okay." Nkechi continued staring at him in silence. Tears gradually formed in her eyes. "Afo," she whispered weakly. "Yes," he replied gently. "It's really me." She continued gazing at him as though afraid he might disappear if she blinked.
You
Slowly,
look absolutely
she raised a
beautiful.
trembling hand and touched his
And you
face.
look so handsome.
Her fingers shook slightly as they rested against his cheek. "You are really here," she murmured. Mr. Afo carefully held her hand and pressed it gently between his own. "Yes," he said quietly. "I'm here." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Words seemed unnecessary. Their eyes communicated years of separation, longing, pain, and unanswered questions. Although so much time had passed, the reality of their reunion still felt almost impossible to believe. As emotional as the moment was, Mr. Afo could not ignore what the doctor had told him. His expression grew serious. "The doctor said you've been sick for a long time," he said gently. "He told me you need surgery." At those words, Nkechi lowered her gaze. A shadow crossed her face. After a brief silence, she nodded. "I know," she replied softly. Mr. Afo stared at her in surprise. "You knew?" She nodded again. "I found out years ago." Her voice was weak, and every
You
sentence
look
seemed to
absolutely
require effort.
beautiful.
Slowly,
And you look
she
so
explained that she
handsome.
had been aware of the illness for a long time. The surgery had always been necessary, but she had never been able to afford it. Determined not to give up, she had spent years trying to save enough money for treatment. She revealed that one of the reasons she had taken the hotel cleaning job was to continue raising funds for the operation. Hearing those words shattered something inside Mr. Afo. As he looked at her frail face, many things suddenly began to make sense. The exhaustion, the weight loss, the difficult working conditions, and the sadness hidden behind her eyes all seemed connected to a struggle she had been
beautiful.
carrying alone for years.
And you look so
He
handsome.
desperately wanted answers. He wanted to know what had happened to the successful career she once had. He wanted to know why she disappeared from his life and why she never reached out to him. But looking at her condition, he realized that those questions could wait. She was far too weak. Even while speaking, he could hear traces of pain in her voice. Nkechi also seemed to have questions of her own. Occasionally she looked at him as if she wanted to ask about his life abroad, his success, and everything that had happened during their years apart. Yet she remained silent.
You look absolutely
Perhaps neither
beautiful.
of them knew where to begin.
And you look so handsome.
Seeing how exhausted she was becoming, Mr. Afo gently adjusted the blanket around her shoulders and brushed a loose strand of hair away from her face. "Please," he said softly, "try to rest." Nkechi looked at him quietly. Her eyes lingered on his face, as though she feared that if she closed them, she might wake up and discover that the reunion had only been a dream. For the first time in many years, she was no longer facing her struggles alone. And although neither of them knew what the future would bring, both could feel that their lives had just entered a new chapter. After asking Nkechi to
You
rest,
look absolutely
Mr. Afo
beautiful.
remained seated beside her hospital
look
bed
so
for several
handsome.
quiet moments. He watched her as she slowly closed her eyes and drifted back into sleep. Her breathing became steadier, and for the first time since finding her, she appeared somewhat peaceful. Yet seeing her in such a fragile condition filled him with sadness. The woman who had once been full of life, ambition, and endless optimism now looked exhausted from years of silent battles. Eventually, he rose from his chair and quietly left the ward. There was something important he needed to do. Without wasting any time, he walked directly to the doctor's office.
You look
When he
absolutely
arrived,
beautiful.
the doctor welcomed him inside and
you look
invited
so
him to sit
handsome.
down. Mr. Afo remained standing. "Doctor," he said with determination, "I need you to tell me everything." The doctor carefully explained the details of Nkechi's condition. He described the illness she had been carrying for years and the complication that had developed because treatment had been delayed. He also explained the surgical procedure she urgently required and the risks involved if action was not taken quickly. Mr. Afo listened attentively without interrupting. Every word increased his concern, but it also strengthened his resolve. When the doctor finished speaking,
You look
Mr. Afo asked
absolutely
a simple
beautiful.
question. "What
And
do
you
you
look
need
so
from me to
handsome."
begin?" The doctor explained that several financial obligations and medical preparations would have to be completed immediately before the procedure could be scheduled. Without hesitation, Mr. Afo gave his answer. "Start everything." The doctor blinked in surprise. "You want us to proceed right away?" "Yes," Mr. Afo replied firmly. "I don't want any delays. Whatever needs to be done, do it." His voice carried a level of certainty that left no room for discussion. The next several hours were spent completing all necessary arrangements.
You look absolutely
He
beautiful.
paid every required fee, signed
And you
medical
look so
documents,
handsome.
approved treatment plans, and asked detailed questions about the surgery. He wanted to understand every step of the process and every measure that would be taken to ensure Nkechi's safety. Before leaving the office, he looked directly at the doctor. "Please," he said quietly, "do everything possible to save her." The doctor nodded reassuringly. "We will do everything within our power." Once the preparations were complete, the hospital staff immediately began organizing the procedure. Nurses moved in and out of Nkechi's room while specialists reviewed her medical records and prepared the operating theater. By evening, everything was ready. Mr. Afo stood silently in the hallway as Nkechi was gently wheeled toward surgery. Watching her hospital bed disappear down the corridor was one of the most difficult moments of his life. He felt powerless, unable to do anything except wait. As she was taken away, he bowed his head and offered a silent prayer. "Lord, please protect her. After everything that has happened, I cannot bear to lose her." The hours that followed felt endless. Every
look
minute seemed
absolutely
longer than the
beautiful.
last. He
And you
paced the
look so
hospital
handsome.
corridors, sat down only to stand up again moments later, and repeatedly checked the doors leading to the operating theater. Finally, the surgery was completed. When the doctor emerged and informed him that the operation had been successful, a wave of relief washed over him. For the first time since their reunion, he felt hope. The doctor explained that although the surgery had gone well, Nkechi would still need to remain under close observation. The medical team wanted to monitor her recovery carefully and ensure that her body responded positively to the treatment. Mr. Afo listened closely.
You look
"Will she recover
absolutely
completely?"
beautiful.
he asked.
And you look
The
so
doctor smiled
handsome.
reassuringly. "The operation was successful. We are optimistic. She needs rest and proper care, but her condition is much better now." Those words lifted a tremendous burden from his heart. During the days that followed, Nkechi remained in the hospital recovering. While the doctors monitored her progress, Mr. Afo occupied himself with several important matters he had arranged before returning home. Months earlier, while still abroad, he had begun discussions with a real estate company regarding the purchase of a luxurious fully furnished home in one of Abuja's most desirable
You look
neighborhoods.
absolutely beautiful.
The transaction had been progressing
look
for some
so
time,
handsome.
and now he finalized everything. After completing the payment, the company officially handed over the property. One of the representatives congratulated him warmly as he received the keys and ownership documents. "Congratulations, sir. The house is now yours." Mr. Afo accepted the keys quietly. Although it was a significant achievement, his thoughts were elsewhere. At nearly the same time, another long-awaited development occurred. The luxury vehicle he had purchased and shipped months earlier had finally arrived in the country. His clearing agent contacted him with the news, and he immediately completed the necessary procedures to take possession of it. To anyone observing from the outside, it appeared that everything in his life was falling perfectly into place. He had returned home successful, wealthy, and capable of acquiring the finest things money could buy. Yet despite the new house, the expensive car, and all his accomplishments, his thoughts continually returned to one person: Nkechi. Every decision he made and every place he visited seemed insignificant compared to her recovery. Wealth no longer felt meaningful if she was not healthy enough to enjoy life. Each day, he visited the hospital and spent time by her bedside, encouraging her and ensuring she had everything she needed. As the days passed, her condition steadily improved. Then, one morning, he arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. The atmosphere felt different. The nurses seemed more relaxed, and there was a noticeable sense of optimism among the staff. After completing another thorough examination, the doctor reviewed Nkechi's latest results and smiled. For the first time since her surgery, the smile carried genuine confidence. It was the kind of smile that suggested good news was finally on its way. The doctor reviewed Nkechi's latest test results carefully before looking up with a reassuring smile. "She is responding very well to treatment," he said. The words immediately eased some of the tension that had been weighing on Mr. Afor's heart. For days, he had lived with constant worry, fearing that her condition might worsen despite the successful surgery. A hopeful expression crossed his face. "So she can leave the hospital now?" he asked. The doctor nodded. "Yes, she is well enough to be discharged. However, she still needs plenty of rest and must avoid unnecessary stress while her body continues to heal." Relief washed over Mr. Afor.
Beautiful.
He thanked the doctor sincerely before making his way back to Nkechi's room. When he entered the ward, he found her sitting quietly on the hospital bed. The color had begun to return to her face, and although she still looked weak, there was a noticeable improvement in her condition. A gentle smile appeared on his face. "You are going home today," he said. Nkechi looked at him with surprise. "Home," she repeated softly. "Yes," he replied. "It's time to leave this place." Carefully, he helped her stand from the bed. Even though she insisted that she felt stronger, he remained cautious, supporting her every step of the way as they slowly walked out of the hospital together. The fresh air greeted them as they stepped outside. Nkechi paused almost immediately. Parked nearby was an elegant luxury vehicle unlike anything she had ever imagined herself riding in. Its polished exterior gleamed beneath the sunlight, and its presence alone spoke of wealth and success. She slowly turned toward Mr. Afor, her eyes filled with questions. However, he simply smiled, walked to the passenger side, and opened the door for her.
Absolutely beautiful.
"Careful," he said gently.
"And you look so handsome."
He helped her settle comfortably into the seat before quietly closing the door and moving to the driver's side. Soon they were driving through the busy streets of Abuja. For much of the journey, silence filled the car. Both of them carried countless questions in their hearts. Years of separation had created a distance that neither knew how to bridge immediately. Nkechi occasionally glanced at him while he focused on the road ahead. She wanted to know everything. She wanted to know how he had become successful, where life had taken him, and why he had suddenly reappeared after all these years. Mr. Afor had his own questions. He wanted to understand the hardships she had endured, the struggles that had brought her to this point, and the reasons behind her disappearance. Yet neither of them knew where to begin. Eventually, Nkechi broke the silence. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly. "To my house," he replied. Then, with deliberate casualness, he added, "While you were recovering, I managed to get a small place." Nkechi simply nodded. But as the journey continued, she began to notice changes in their surroundings. The car left the crowded sections of the city and entered
You
one
look
of Abuja's
absolutely
most
beautiful.
prestigious neighborhoods.
And you look
The
so
difference was
handsome.
impossible to ignore. The roads were wider and cleaner. Beautiful trees lined the streets. Massive homes stood behind elegant gates, and luxury vehicles could be seen parked everywhere. Nkechi looked out the window, then turned toward Mr. Afo again. A faint smile touched her lips. Whatever he meant by a small place, she knew it certainly wasn't small. Even the least expensive property in that neighborhood would be beyond the reach of most people. Yet Mr. Afo said nothing. He simply continued driving. Eventually, the vehicle
You look
slowed and stopped
absolutely
before a
beautiful.
towering gate.
And you
Before
look so
Nkechi could ask
handsome.
any questions, the gate opened automatically. The car rolled smoothly into an enormous compound. Her eyes widened. The grounds alone looked larger than some hotels she had seen. Beautiful landscaping surrounded the property, and the mansion standing at its center looked magnificent. When the vehicle came to a stop, Mr. Afo quickly stepped out and walked around to assist her. "Take your time," he said. Carefully, he helped her out of the car and supported her as they made their way toward the entrance. The moment they stepped inside, Nkechi was
You
speechless.
look absolutely beautiful.
Every detail of the house reflected
And you look
elegance
so
and luxury.
handsome.
The lighting was warm and sophisticated. The furniture was stylish and expensive. Beautiful artwork decorated the walls, while every corner of the mansion seemed carefully designed to create an atmosphere of comfort and prestige. It felt less like a house and more like something from a dream. Without drawing attention to any of it, Mr. Afo guided her upstairs. He opened the door to a spacious bedroom and gestured toward it. "This room is yours," he said softly. The room was beautiful, furnished with everything she could possibly need. He then
You look
showed her the
absolutely
adjoining
beautiful.
bathroom. "Take a
And
bath
you
and
look
get
so
comfortable,"
handsome.
he told her. "I'll go get something for you to eat." Nkechi looked at him quietly. After making sure she was settled, Mr. Afo left the room. A short while later, she heard the sound of a car leaving the compound. Left alone, Nkechi slowly walked around the bedroom, taking in every detail. The room itself was larger than entire apartments she had lived in during some of the hardest periods of her life. Curiosity eventually drew her toward the bathroom. The moment she entered, she stopped in astonishment. The space was enormous.
You look absolutely
Modern
beautiful.
fixtures gleamed beneath soft
And you
lighting,
look so
and every
handsome.
detail reflected luxury. At the center stood a large jacuzzi bathtub that looked as though it belonged in a five-star resort. She gently ran her fingers across its smooth surface. For a moment, she wondered if she was dreaming. Nothing about her recent life had prepared her for surroundings like this. After taking a long, refreshing bath, she felt stronger and more relaxed than she had in months. The warm water seemed to wash away some of the exhaustion and pain she had been carrying for so long. Unable to resist her curiosity any longer, she left the bedroom and began exploring the mansion. Slowly, she wandered through the hallways, examining every room she passed. The scale of the house amazed her. Every space was thoughtfully designed and beautifully furnished. Eventually, she found herself in the kitchen. The room was so large that it seemed unbelievable. The kitchen alone felt bigger than some of the homes she had lived in over the years. She walked toward the large kitchen island and gently rested her hand upon its polished surface. As she stood there, memories began flooding back.
You look absolutely
Years earlier,
beautiful.
she and Afo had spent
And you look
countless
so
evenings
handsome.
talking about their future. Sitting together in his tiny apartment, they would imagine a different life. They dreamed about success, comfort, and a home where they would never have to worry about money again. Back then, those conversations had felt like distant fantasies. Now, standing inside this magnificent mansion, surrounded by everything they had once dreamed about, Nkechi found herself overwhelmed with emotion. The life they had once imagined together was no longer a dream. It was standing all around her. And for the first time since seeing Afo again,
You
she
look
truly began to
absolutely
understand
beautiful.
just how far he had come.
And you look so handsome.
As Nkechi stood in the spacious kitchen, memories from years gone by continued to flood her mind. She remembered the countless evenings she and Afo had spent sitting together in his small apartment, dreaming about a future that seemed impossibly distant at the time. They had imagined a life free from financial struggles, a life filled with comfort, stability, and happiness. They talked about owning a beautiful home, building a family, and creating a future where they would never have to worry about surviving from one day to the next. Back then, those conversations had been little more than hopeful fantasies shared between two young people deeply in love. Yet now, standing inside a magnificent mansion that looked as though it belonged to someone of extraordinary wealth, she realized that Afo had somehow transformed those dreams into reality. The realization stirred a powerful question inside her. How had he achieved all of this? How had the young man she once knew become someone capable of owning such luxury and success? Her eyes wandered across the elegant surroundings once more. Every piece of furniture, every decoration, and every carefully designed corner of the house reflected a level of prosperity she could hardly comprehend. This can't be real, she whispered to herself.
You look absolutely beautiful.
Just then, the sound of the front door opening echoed through the house. Nkechi immediately turned toward the living room. A few moments later, she saw Afo entering the house carrying several bags. He had returned from a nearby restaurant with food for them. His movements were calm and relaxed as he placed the bags on the dining table and began unpacking them. I brought something for us to eat, he said gently. Nkechi remained where she was, watching him closely. Her heart was overflowing with questions. Ever since she had seen the mansion, those questions had only multiplied. She wanted answers, and she wanted them now.
Beautiful.
Afo noticed the expression on her face but continued arranging the food. Come, he said with a small smile. Let's eat first. After that, you can take your medication. He pulled out a chair for her and gestured toward the table. But Nkechi did not move. She looked at the food and then back at him. Finally, she spoke. No. Afo paused and looked at her. What do you mean, no? Her voice grew firmer. I'm not eating until you tell me the truth. The seriousness in her tone immediately caught his attention. Nkechi, you need to eat first, he said patiently.
And you look
She
so
slowly
handsome.
shook her head. No. Not until you answer my questions. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she looked directly into his eyes. What happened to you? She asked. Why did you suddenly disappear? Why did you stop contacting me? And how did you become so wealthy? The room fell silent. Afo closed his eyes briefly and released a slow breath. He had known this conversation would eventually happen. There was no avoiding it any longer. Quietly, he pulled out a chair and sat down.
You look absolutely
If I'm going
beautiful.
to explain everything, you need to sit down too, he said. After a brief hesitation, Nkechi walked over and took a seat opposite him. The atmosphere became heavy with anticipation. Afo rested his hands on the table and stared at them for a moment before looking back at her. All right, he said softly. I'll tell you everything. Nkechi remained silent, waiting. Afo took another deep breath as though preparing himself to revisit memories he had carried for years. Do you remember the last normal conversation we had after I arrived abroad? He asked. Nkechi nodded slowly. Of course I remember. A shadow passed across Afo's face. You
look
called me that
absolutely
morning,
beautiful.
he said.
And
We
you
spoke
look
like
so
we always
handsome.
did. You told me about your day, and I told you I was rushing because I didn't want to be late for class. A faint look of recognition appeared in her eyes. Yes, she replied quietly. I remember that conversation. Afo leaned back slightly in his chair. That morning, I was running to catch a train. Everything happened very quickly. I was focused on getting to school on time, and I wasn't paying attention to anything else around me. He paused briefly, gathering his thoughts. Later that day, during a break between classes, I wanted to call you.
Absolutely beautiful.
Nkechi listened
And
carefully.
you look so handsome.
I reached into my pocket to get my phone. His voice became noticeably lower. And that's when I realized it was gone. Nkechi's eyes widened. Afo nodded slowly. At first, I thought I had misplaced it. I checked my backpack, my jacket, and every pocket I had. I searched everywhere. But it wasn't there. The memory still seemed painful even after all those years. I went back through every place I had visited that morning. I contacted the train station. I checked with lost and found offices.
You look absolutely
I searched for
beautiful.
days. He
And
looked
you look
down
so
for a moment
handsome.
before continuing. But my phone was never recovered. Nkechi sat frozen, absorbing every word. For years she had believed he had simply abandoned her. Now she was hearing a completely different story. Afo looked directly into her eyes. That was the beginning of everything that went wrong. His expression carried a mixture of regret, sadness, and frustration. I never imagined that losing a single phone would change both our lives so completely. The room fell silent again. And as Nkechi stared at him, she realized that the answers she had waited
absolutely
years to
beautiful.
hear were only just beginning to
And you look
unfold.
so handsome.
Afo took a deep breath before continuing his story. When I realized my phone was missing, I searched everywhere for it, he said. I checked my bag repeatedly, went back to my classroom, retraced my steps, and searched every place I had visited that day. I refused to believe it was gone. He paused briefly as the memory resurfaced. The more I thought about it, the more I became convinced that the last place I had seen it was on the train. I must have dropped it while trying to put it back into my pocket during the rush. Nkechi covered her mouth in shock as she listened.
You look
Afo nodded
absolutely
sadly.
beautiful.
After that,
And
everything
you look
changed.
so handsome.
My phone contained all my contacts. I had no way of reaching you. Your number was saved there, and I had never memorized it because I never imagined I would lose access to it. Suddenly, I had no way to call you, send a message, or even let you know what had happened. His voice grew quieter. I returned to the train station several times. I spoke to staff members, searched through lost and found departments, and even tried to locate the exact train I had boarded that morning. But it was useless. The phone was gone. He leaned
look
back in his chair
absolutely
and looked
beautiful.
at her. I
And you
thought
look
about
so
writing
handsome.
letters, but I wasn't certain they would reach you. I didn't know if you would still be at the same address months later. I felt trapped and helpless. For a moment, silence settled between them. Afo stared at the table before continuing. It was one of the loneliest periods of my life. But despite everything, I had to keep moving forward. I couldn't allow my studies to fall apart. He explained how he focused on completing his master's degree despite the emotional burden he carried. The program was demanding, and life in a foreign country was far from
You
easy.
look absolutely beautiful.
Yet he worked tirelessly,
you
determined
look
to
so
honor the
handsome.
sacrifice Nkechi had made to help him get there. After graduation, he secured a job through contacts he had met at the university. The position helped him survive and provided stability, but it was only the beginning. After work each day, he said, a few friends and I spent our evenings working on a technology project. Nkechi looked at him curiously. A technology project? Afo smiled faintly. Yes. At first it was nothing more than an idea. We worked on it after our regular jobs, often late into the night. We invested our time, energy, and every bit of knowledge we had. There were many moments when we doubted ourselves, but we kept going. He paused as memories of those difficult years returned. In the beginning, the project was very small. Hardly anyone knew about it. But little by little it began to grow. More people started using it. Investors became interested. Opportunities appeared that we never expected. Nkechi listened attentively. Eventually, he continued,
You look
it grew
absolutely
beyond
beautiful.
anything we had imagined.
And you look so
The company
handsome.
became successful enough that we no longer needed our regular jobs. The business was generating more income than we could have earned through traditional employment. A look of amazement appeared on Nkechi's face. Afo laughed softly. It still feels unbelievable when I think about it. What started as a small idea among friends became something much bigger than any of us expected. As the company expanded, its value continued to rise. New opportunities opened up, and before long, the founders found themselves facing a life-changing decision. Eventually, we decided to sell the company, Afo explained.
And you look
Nkechi
so
blinked in
handsome.
surprise. You sold it? Yes, he replied. Each of us wanted to pursue different goals and different futures. Selling the company seemed like the best decision for everyone involved. He looked directly at her. The sale brought in more money than I had ever dreamed possible. It changed my life completely. The room became quiet again. Nkechi sat motionless as she tried to absorb everything she was hearing. After that, Afo continued, I started thinking seriously about coming home. Despite all the success, there was still something missing. His eyes softened.
And you look so handsome.
You. The word hung heavily in the air. Afo took another breath before continuing. There is something else you should know. Nkechi looked up. After I completed my studies, I never stopped trying to find you. At one point, a friend of mine was preparing to return home. He was the same friend who had introduced me to the scholarship opportunity years earlier. Nkechi listened carefully. I asked him to deliver a message to you. I told him where you lived and asked him to visit you. A shadow crossed Afo's face. When he arrived, he discovered that you no longer lived there.
And you look so
Nkechi
handsome.
lowered her eyes. He searched for information, but nobody could tell him where you had gone. When he reported back to me, I became even more worried. For years, the uncertainty had haunted him. I kept wondering what had happened to you. I imagined countless possibilities. Sometimes I hoped you had moved on and built a good life. Other times I feared something terrible had happened. His voice grew emotional. And then I saw you again. He paused. When I walked out of that hotel bathroom and realized the cleaner standing in the room was you.
Beautiful.
He struggled briefly to
And
continue.
you look so handsome.
It broke my heart. The pain in his eyes was impossible to hide. You were working there, cleaning rooms. You looked exhausted and sick. Nothing about what I saw matched the future we had dreamed about together. The room became silent once more. Finally, Afo looked at her with a mixture of concern and sadness. Nkechi, he said gently, what happened? What really happened after I left? For a long moment, she did not answer. She adjusted herself in her chair and stared at the table as if gathering the strength to revisit painful memories she had buried long ago.
And you look
When
so
she finally
handsome.
spoke, her voice was low and heavy. I'll tell you everything. Afo remained silent, allowing her the space she needed. Nkechi folded her hands together and looked down. At first, everything was fine after you left. I missed you terribly, but we still spoke regularly. Hearing your voice made the distance easier to bear. I believed we were still moving toward the future we had planned. A sad smile appeared briefly on her face before fading. But then one day, I couldn't reach you. She swallowed hard. I called again and again.
You look absolutely beautiful.
At first I thought you were simply busy
And
with
you
school.
look so handsome.
Then I thought your phone might be switched off temporarily. Her fingers tightened around each other. But the calls never connected. The memory still hurt. Day after day, I kept trying. Every morning, every evening, whenever I had a free moment. I kept hoping your voice would answer. She lowered her eyes further. But it never happened. And with those words, the
look
painful story of
absolutely
everything she
beautiful.
had endured after losing
And you look
contact with
so
him finally
handsome.
began to unfold.